Hi, this is Can You See My Screen, a podcast dedicated to running better workshops, training and meetings online. I'm Michael Forrest and I do a lot of video production, live streaming and software development.
I'm Ivanka Magic. I do user research. I do a lot of talking to people, workshops, courses and presentations. And with so much of our work moving online and having to be done remotely, we think that we can help people make it easier and better.
And today we are joined by Craig Steele and Daniel Devine of Digital Skills Education. So why don't you sort of give us a bit of an introduction to what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Craig. I'm a computer scientist, I'm a gadget geek, and I'm interested in all things tech. So my background is about building apps and games and websites, but what I'm really interested in is ways that we can improve people's digital skills. So Digital Skills Education, we run interactive training that is all about helping people develop those skills. Daniel?
Yeah, hi, nice to meet you. So we have lots of different online courses and activities that we run for young people at school, but we also do lots of stuff with adult learners as well. My background is in engineering and in cybersecurity, but I've always done some educational stuff on the side, and now it's my full-time job.
All right, and you sort of got in touch and told us some of the interesting ways you're running live streams and things like that. So that's what we're going to be finding out a bit more from you today. But first, title. Try to find out. Connected. It's very hard to tell the volume levels on this today. So anyway, so do you want to give us the sort of shape of the sort of things you're offering? Like what does one of your live streams, educational workshops look like?
So this all came about because in Scotland there was a big push to give people more opportunities to learn sort of more advanced digital skills. So we're talking about things like learning how to computer program or data science or artificial intelligence. And there was an organisation in Scotland called Skills Development Scotland who really wanted to give more school pupils the opportunity to sort of experience that. And they came to me with this sort of opportunity where they were like, we know that you do lots of hands-on training, you've done in-person stuff. We would like to do something with, across the country to do that. And I spoke to them about it and it became pretty clear pretty quickly that their budget wasn't going to be the type that they were going to be able to travel across the country and do hundreds of workshops. So this was about 5 or 6 years ago. And I said to them at that point, look, if we're wanting to do this, why don't we try live streaming it? Why don't we try doing some sort of interactive workshop online where we can create some sort of interactive resource. We can get the schools to take part live, and me, Daniel, other hosts will live stream it to YouTube. They can watch us on YouTube and they can all do it at the same time. So we started doing that about 5 or 6 years ago, and our first goal was, the target was to try and reach 400 young people to give them this experience across Scotland. But it's been really popular. In fact, Daniel, I think we're well over 400 now.
We're well over 400, yeah. We've had over 200,000 young people use our resources, so the sort of the online activities and the live streams that go alongside those activities. So it's been a really popular format. And Craig, I'm just thinking back to that first one that we ran back in maybe 2015, 2016. We tried to get young people to create their first website. So we tried to get hundreds of young learners to code their own website all at the same time. And I think we maybe tried to bite off more than we could chew in that one, because we were given all these instructions out and we were like, they're not following. And it was sort of like, okay, we need to explain this more clearly. And Craig and I thought, I'm not sure how that went. And then 5 minutes later,
I think I needed a lie down after it immediately. Because we were at opposite end of the rooms trying to do it as well, and we were just looking at each other and we were like, I don't know if anyone's enjoying this. I don't know if anyone's taking part. But I think the feedback came in quite quickly, didn't it, Daniel? There was emails.
Yes. Within like 5 minutes I was finished, and we had all these emails from teachers be like, oh, that was ace. Like, our people had so much fun. They've made websites. We've got like knockoffs of ASOS. We've got all these different things. It's like, oh, okay. Maybe there is something in this after all.
I think the thing about building software is it does lend itself to a grumpy face. So maybe that was what was happening. But so you were pretty early to the live streaming. Well, it was obviously happening before that, but like it seemed like the Wild West to me back in 2015. Still, like OBS and Twitch and things like that. So what gave you the confidence to sort of jump into that kind of video live streaming?
I think it's something that I'd always enjoyed doing, just sort of like I was watching YouTube videos, I was quite comfortable presenting and making little videos, and I think at the time we just thought, why don't we give this a go to begin with and sort of try it out. I think, Daniel, had we experimented with Periscope by that point? Was that something that we'd tried?
Yeah, we were working in a science centre, and we'd experimented using Periscope and on their sort of Facebook page to try and run like some live stream kind of like introductions to stuff that was happening in the science centre. And we thought, okay, well, if people are tuning in to do this, maybe we could do it in classrooms as well. So I suppose we were quite early, but we maybe did only like once or twice a year for a few years, and then in the last couple of years we've really stepped up the number that we're doing. I guess it's become a more accepted format for learning.
Yes, something happened about a couple of years ago that suddenly everyone wanted us to do it online.
Don't know what that could have been. So like you've got some sort of some things you've learned from doing this. So should we start off with you said you always co-present your online events as a team. And there are some benefits to that. So do you want to sort of give us a bit of information about that?
Yeah, so we always tend to do all our presentations, whether it's a full-on live stream or whether it's a training online to a small group, in pairs. There's always at least two of us. And, I think the main reason for that is, well, the first one, you've got someone there to support you if something goes wrong. Like if my camera suddenly stops working or my microphone or someone appears at my door, like Daniel will continue the workshop. We'll make sure it continues happening. And also at the same time, you can support people in the chat and spot things out as well. Daniel, what do you think?
Yeah, it's also just nice to have from a sort of an energy point of view. It's quite easy if you've got, I'm thinking, Craig, we ran some corporate training a few weeks ago and it was on Teams, and the policy was you don't have your webcam turned on. So we were just basically like delivering this training to just like all these black boxes and initials on the screen. And it's quite easy to peel off your energy over sort of like half an hour, because
I was going to say, just like having someone to talk to like that, it means that you can cover anything that goes wrong, whether it's from sort of like technical points of view, or as Daniel said, when you're just speaking down like to black boxes where you can't hear anything and maybe they're not even typing into the chat, having someone that you can have a laugh with and someone who will laugh at your jokes is quite always
that's a big thing, right? Like that's the main reason for having a podcast, really. But would you be in the same room, you two, then for that, or would you not necessarily be in the same room for that?
Listen, I don't think we've ever normally we're in the same room when we present things, but I don't think have we ever done one in the same room together recently, Daniel? Online.
So our very first live streams into schools we did do together. We had a company actually come in and do all the sort of the camera, the mic switching and the mixing, etc. And then a couple of years ago when COVID happened, we then switched to doing it just from home and doing it all ourselves. And we haven't gone back to being in the more studio setup. I think it's some, although there's more things maybe to go wrong doing it separately, you're also in more control, I guess. So yeah, we've always done it from our separate
rooms. Wow. Okay. Yeah, us too. I think we recorded it once in a room together, and it was like, now I've got to figure out. I've got to like mute the other microphone for the entire edit. So yeah, it's sort of easier in a way just to have all the audio isolated, if nothing else.
And it means we can have all our screens like set up the way that we want them, and our own setups, our own little buttons to press as well, so that if Daniel and I were doing that sitting beside each other, I'm sure we would both be reaching for the same buttons or adjusting each other's screens as well. So it keeps that side of it as well. Yeah. When we're doing our stuff for schools, because it's a bit of a larger audience normally than if it was just like a small team, we even have more of us working on it at the same time. So Daniel and I would normally be leading it. So we'd be presenting it, we'd be giving the instructions, we'd be reacting to people as they come in. But we also have usually 2 other people that are working with us, and they're on the sort of back end looking at things for us. So Daniel, do you want to maybe talk about some of their roles, and then
I'd love to hear
David do?
I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the tech that you're using there, because it's all a bit mysterious. It's like, is it Zoom? Is it OBS? You know that.
Yeah. So in terms of the actual sort of the broadcasting setup, usually that comes from my laptop. So I have OBS running on the computer beside me, and I've got my Stream Deck, so I can kind of cue and change the scenes and things like that. We also have a couple of other people that we have with us on the live streams too they don't appear on the stream, or hopefully they don't appear in the stream, and they'll control that, like the activities that the young people are playing. So our activities are basically sort of like games that you progress through, but we can see the answers that the young people are typing in. We can respond to what they're doing. We can hold them at specific points so that they're kind of kept roughly in sync, and we can react to that. So we have someone who watches all of the answers that come in on there, and they forward them on to me and Craig, and they also sort of check that the server's not going to fall over or make any changes kind of as need be, things that would be too distracting for us if we're trying to present at the same time as that. And then we also make sure we have someone to monitor the YouTube stream, make sure that we can both be heard clearly, that there's nothing going wrong in terms of that. Also just checking the comments, checking Twitter, the email, in case there's people having any sort of tech problems, and they can kind of troubleshoot in the background, kind of keeping me and Craig abstracted from all of that potential drama. But thankfully there doesn't tend to be anything.
The way that the pupils interact with us, so we decided very early on we were not going to have a chat feature, because you can imagine if you've got 800 teenagers in a chat, the riot that could cause, what they might type to you as well. So what we decided instead is, rather than having a chat, we wanted to have some other way that we could sort of see their progress and see how they were doing. So our colleague David built us this system where we could build a sort of game, an activity that we could teach the lesson. But as Daniel said, when schools join, they give us like their first name, and they tell us what school they're part of. And on our screens in front of us, as they answer each question, as they progress through it, we can see their answers, we can see how they're doing. So that means that's how we give them the shout out. So that's how we can say something like, Daniel from St. Joseph's Academy, or I can see that you've got this answer. Or this group of people, I can see you're all getting it wrong. Why don't you change something like this? Why don't you look there for the hint? And we were doing a session yesterday which was about data science, but specifically around renewable energy. So the idea was they had to use real world data to come up with a proposal for their school that would show how much solar energy would be collected if they had a solar array on their roof. So it was like they had to map it out on their school roof. But what was interesting about that is we could poll them during the activity. So one of the questions I think that came up was like, well, how did you, does your school currently have some sort of renewable energy? Like, does your school have a wind turbine? Does it have solar panels? And then live on the stream, we can then bring up their responses. We can see on a pie chart how they react. So the challenge there was, how do we get an audience that we wouldn't be able to have like that sort of direct communication with, or that from a risk point of view, we just didn't want them to be able to like chat live on the stream, but we still wanted to be able to feel like we are involving them and feeling as if they're part of it. And I have to say that the feedback, Daniel, that's come in from like teachers and school pupils, that they do definitely feel as if they're interacting with it, that they're involved with it too.
Yeah, we wanted to really make sure that it still feels live, and that something is happening right now and other people are also taking part right now, as opposed to just like wheeling out the TV and sticking a DVD in it or something. Like, this is something different. This is more of an event that they're really contributing to.
And how is that different when you're doing something like a corporate event, when they've all been told to switch their video off? Like, what do you do with them? How do you make them give you a shout out?
So yeah, we've found very quickly that we've adapted so that there's much more moments when we're doing corporate training where we encourage them to type in the chat. So like even right from the very beginning, as soon as people arrive, we sort of say, tell us your name, where it is you're joining from. And then one of our first sort of techniques or tricks is we do sort of like a poll, or we put things in the chat. We say, these are the topics that we're thinking about covering today. Can you react or comment on the ones that you're most interested in learning about? And the secret is, well, we know what we're going to be talking about today, so we're definitely going to cover all these topics. But that gives them the opportunity to sort of interact and react. And we've also built in moments during that online training where we deliberately pause, because if you're in the room with a group of like adults, you can see if they're following along. You can tell if they're enjoying it, if they look confused, to slow down. That's much more difficult when you're doing it online. So we've literally built in more moments where we sort of pause and reflect, and we ask them, is this making sense so far? Tell us in the chat, because it's good for us to know if this is making sense. Tell us something that tell us something interesting that you learned in that section that you didn't know before. Again, if you were in the room with someone would have just said that out loud, wouldn't they? They would have said, oh, I didn't know that. That was interesting. But if you're doing it online and you can't see them and you can't hear them, you need to ask them to tell you those things. And from a presenter's point of view, that then makes it so much simpler, because I don't know about you, but like I get that feeling of relief, like, oh, it's making sense. People are reacting. It's working, or and whether that's a message in the chat or whether it's someone just sort of like putting their thumbs up and saying, "Yep, all making sense. Keep going." That's good for me.
Cool. So you've got your sort of secondary bespoke. You've got your sort of bespoke way of interacting with everyone that is quite fine tuned to your content, and that sounds like you've got quite a sophisticated system going on there with all the reporting and back end and stuff. But I mean, generally, it sounds like you've got pretty like high production values for what you're doing, especially compared to what a lot of people are doing. Do you want to tell us a bit about how you sort of do your segment production and things like that to sort of add even more polish to these things, or reliability?
I'm glad you think it's high production and well polished, because it doesn't feel like that when I'm really proud of what we do, and I think the way that we've put it together is quite exciting. One of the decisions that we made about it was that idea. I think we wanted it to feel like, our first couple of goes at it, we almost were wanting to replicate like live television and that sort of feeling of like presenting and that sort of broadcast style. But what we quickly switched into was almost the sort of Twitch aesthetic, like especially with what young people would normally be watching online as well. That idea of we're with you, we're doing it from our computer rooms. You can see our lights, you can see our setup and stuff. It's not meant to look perfect. And then we kind of put we plan out the session, and then we mix it between having sort of us talking to the camera, but we also have like activity dashboards and other little overlays that we use. Daniel, you might be better to talk about some of the sort of overlays and the little bits we put in.
Yeah, so sort of in OBS, what we use for broadcasting, we have maybe about 8 to 10 scenes for each of the lessons we do, and that's the things like the stream starting soon. That's basically where you just have Craig and I on the screen, and we always try and go to the effort of, rather than just having the two webcam feeds side by side 50-50, just putting them in a frame and leaving a space that we can add some sort of like text boxes with additional instructions. So like the social media tags, or the certain things that we know that the pupils are going to kind of like forget the website that they have to go to, or they might or we might need to give them hints for specific questions, specific answers. So leaving that space that we can kind of put in those extra instructions that we want to read. We also tend to have a sort of, after our introduction, we say hello, we have a YouTube video. So for each of our activities, we try and create a sort of like 1 to 2 minute kind of like teaser or trailer that's a bit over the top, a bit dramatic, just to kind of hype them up before we actually kind of set them up and go on the activity as well. And I think just that kind of mixture of different scenes where you've got just us speaking to the camera, you've got other videos, there's always background music on it, and then we've got those dashboards that Craig was talking about. So because we build the activities that they're playing, it means we actually have access to the database that all their answers are going into. So we have pie charts that we can see kind of what they're answering. So yesterday we asked them, what changes have they made to help the environment? Well, we can moderate those and then show them up on the screen, because it means we can then kind of react. They can actually see, like, it gives them a reason to answer the questions properly, because they might go somewhere if they actually kind of put the effort into it. So we try and give them something interesting to look at as well, because we get a really wide range of abilities completing their activities. So sort of like, Craig, I think we initially said we wanted it to be sort of like 11 to 14-year-olds, but actually when you say that, you get the people with 9 and 10-year-olds being like, oh, they're capable, they could do that. And then you get the people sort of like a bit older. So some people would fly through it really quickly and some people need a bit more time. So by having these streams where hopefully there's interesting stuff going on, it means we keep them engaged for a bit longer. No one kind of feels
our
like
most popular bit of engagement, Daniel, I should say, is our Totalizer. Our most popular activity is a cybersecurity one. It's called How to Rob a Bank. So the idea is that we're going to take part in an online bank heist, and they're going to work through the stages of how they would actually go about hacking into a bank. And it's based on real life, so it is based on the real things that, you know, cybersecurity specialists need to know. But on our live stream, we have our Totalizer. And as they start to steal money from this fictional bank, the Totalizer cranks up, the ka-ching noise goes in place, and that becomes so much fun when they realise that when they're doing something on their computer in school, it's actually having an effect on what's happening on the stream. So yeah, rather than raising money for a charity, it's like a Blue Peter appeal, you know, it's how much money can we steal from Strathclyde Bank. So sometimes it's shout outs, but sometimes it's more fun little things like that.
Great stuff.
So, I'm going to show my age now, but while I was at uni and the internet was very young, there was a website. MIT had a robot that you could send an instruction to, and then it would water a plant.
Oh, cool.
And one of the most exciting evenings of my life, being like 18, 19, was sat at home on my 1440 baud modem, sending an instruction to MIT and then sitting there for about an hour while I waited for this robot to move and water a plant. So
Did it have a feed then, a video feed?
It had a
back
feed.
then? Wow.
Yeah, it was like, but you can imagine the speed at which this thing updated was quite. But you know that the power of being able to control something so far away and see it when you're a kid. I mean, I was not as young as your kids then, but you know, I was still very, very excited. So yes, I can imagine that activity would be great.
It is a real social interaction, right? Even if it's kind of coming through the screen in that way. I still kind of get a bit nervous about saying hi in chat and getting like a shout out from a streamer, and it's like, oh no, I mean, it sort of really feels like you're in the room with them when they just sort of say your name, and that doesn't seem to be changing. It doesn't seem to be something I'm getting used to. It's just a new type of social interaction that's quite compelling, really. Let's talk about how you do plan. Like you do a lot of planning for these things. I mean, although I did want to ask, like, in terms of like the production of those TV clips, is that a whole extra thing? Like, is that a lot of work then?
So that sometimes on our intros we have little trailers to begin with, and usually we film them. I mean, it's filmed on my phone, so it's filmed on my phone and edited on Video Leap or iMovie sometimes, just to make it roughly, and occasionally we work with other people to maybe do a more polished version of it. We've even been experimenting with an AI to build our last trailer, so we used a thing called Lumen 5, where you give it a script and then it creates a video using stock footage. And do you know what? It was all right. It was fine. We had to change a few bits, but we were like,
don't tell the video people.
Well, obviously it's never going to be as good as actually having a real person do it, but for what we needed, for those 20 seconds that was just going to fill a gap where we needed it, we were able to do that as well. So I think a key thing though that we do as part of our preparing is, for our school ones, it needs to work, because like all these schools from across the country, there could be like 35 different schools who are all tuning in at the one time. They've been got out of other school periods to take part in this. We need to make sure that our live stream works, that we are giving them the right information, that we are demonstrating the stuff and it all works, because it would be really disappointing if it didn't work and they couldn't take part in their class. And it's not as if we could say, oh, just come back in half an hour and we'll get it sorted. They've went into double English by then. They're out doing another subject. So what we do to reduce our risk is we record parts of our live stream, and we record it as if we were doing it live, so that we can then slot that in and it reduces the risk. So the bits that we tend to record are usually our opening, our introduction, our first 3 or 4 minutes. So we've got our script, we wear the same clothes that we're going to wear when we do the live stream, and we record it. And what that means is that we know that the first 5 minutes, which is going to be the most important part, it's the part where we need to tell them the website they need to be on, given the right instructions. If we've got people that we're partnered with, that we're definitely mentioning them, that we're giving a shout out to whoever's sponsoring it. And by recording that in advance, what you then do, Daniel, is when you start the stream, I guess you hit play to begin with.
Yeah, I start streaming and then I just start playing a video. Well, Craig and Daniel, from usually the day before or the morning before, are kind of introducing and welcoming people to the session, and then we go live after that has finished, and hopefully it's really seamless because there's a wee trailer in the middle, so so any continuity things probably are quite subtle. But it's not just the introduction, we also record any tech demos that we tend to do. So if we are actually going to do some live programming, or we are some of the cybersecurity ones, there's a terminal we have to sort of type in the commands. I can't type without typos at the best of times, never mind when I've got 800 15-year-olds watching for me to make a mistake. So quite often I'll pre-record that, and then either I'll replay the video totally, or sometimes I'll just play the video, but I'll commentate over it live as if I'm doing it right now. So it just kind of takes the pressure off of doing those demos. It means you can focus on just kind of focus on the script, focus on interacting with people, and don't worry that the demo is going to fall over, or I'm going to do a typo, or a window's going to pop up or something on the screen.
And you don't even need to just do that when it's like a big live stream event. We do it when we're doing training sessions for businesses as well. So one of our training sessions is about cybersecurity that we do for workplaces. And as part of it, we show them how to use a password manager. And again, we've recorded how the instructions are to use the password manager, because what you don't want to do is to accidentally flash your entire password list or something sensitive. So by filming that and then commentating over it, it means that we know that it's going to work, it's going to demonstrate it correctly, that we're showing all the features in the right order. And it also has the benefit then at the end of the workshop, you can say, look, if you missed how to follow along with that, we've got that video, we'll put it onto the resource page, you can watch it back. And it's not just been a sort of random, okay, can you see my screen moment where you're bringing it up and having to demo it live. Yeah, we've prepared that. And again, from our own point of view presenting, I know that's going to work. So I know that that's not going to be it's not a point that's potentially going to go wrong. We can relax, we can do that. So everything from the sort of more complicated things, but even through to stuff that you just don't want to have to make a mistake on, or it would require too much focus. How many times have you been trying to demonstrate a tool to someone and then the company have updated it the night before and you don't know where that button is, or for some reason it's not letting you in? By recording it, we've reduced that risk as well. So yeah, maybe that's quite controversial to say that as part of our 45-minute live stream, we don't go live technically until about 6 or 7 minutes into it, because we've got the pre-recorded intro, then we've got the little trailer, and then we're genuinely live from that point on. And any pupils, schools who are watching this now and know the secret behind the fact will be watching for those moments. They'll be like, oh, Craig's shirt is slightly different. You must have recorded that yesterday.
Well, I think it sounds very, very sensible, given laying out the objectives that that sort of the importance of those first few minutes, and the fact. I think it sounds like a lovely cheat.
Yeah,
it's very sensible.
It makes you think from a teaching point of view as well. What are you just repeating? every time you do it. And it almost makes you sort of think then, how much of what we teach in real life could just be a video, could be something that is the same thing every time you do it. And I suppose then when we've been making our lessons, it then forces into more of like, well, how do we make the most of the fact that we're live or that we're with a group compared to just like, slowly shuffling through the same sort of slides, the same explanation.
Much more optimized for the medium rather than just taking something that was offline and then just putting it on it makes perfect sense. Like how do I use this technology and this experience in the best way? Sounds very sensible to me. I've noted that down for later.
Yes. Well, I said like production values, but really I think it's the sophistication of it, the fact that you are really engaging with the medium and playing to its strengths in ways that you're able to. You can sort of mitigate different risks, and you're like putting your energy into the bits that should be live, and sort of like not taking the risk out of the things that don't need to be like different and interactive. But and it's a world that I've been in for years as a musician, trying to figure out like, because I could just press play on an iPod and that could be a live show, or like how much, or do I want to be like an improviser and go, tell me a type of dog and I'll make up a song about it. Like it can get really contrived either way. So but there's so many possibilities there that it's really great to see that you're on the technological, like building bespoke kind of software to do it, and as well as kind of engaging with the sort of pre-recording, the sort of like hybrid, I'm going to talk over a pre-recording, all those different ways that it can be approached. And I think we've barely scratched the surface of what's possible with this. And it's I think you're doing some really it's some inspiring ideas already to that we can maybe start incorporating into our work. And I also empathize with that thing of having to wear the same clothes when you produce videos. I've been wearing the same clothes for 3 days in a row because I thought I was going to finish that video on Tuesday, and I'm still working on it.
We've had situations. I was just going to say, and one of our colleagues once had a haircut at a point, and we were like, you remember we've recorded a part of that, you're going to need to wear a hat for this section, otherwise it's going to jump out. I mean, that was just a bit fun, but like...
My immediate reaction was that my hair never looks, I've got curly hair, never looks the same 2 days in a row. I'd be quite a challenge to pull off the making myself look the same. But it's also the fact that my introductions there are never two introductions I do that are exactly the same. So I'd probably obsess with exactly what needed to be in that first 5 or 6 minutes, I think. But that's a different side of challenge, I suppose, that comes from knowing, the practice of knowing what you're doing, delivering these classes and these lessons, that it's just like, I know what this is for.
So my challenge to your audience would be then, like, without having to do it too technically, look at, if you're doing a presentation in 2 weeks' time, look through your slides, look through your notes, work out, is there a part of that I could record that would make it easier or would make me more comfortable about saying it? Because maybe it's not that you're worried because a tech thing could go wrong. Maybe you're worried because it's a complicated topic or a sensitive topic and you don't want to say the wrong thing. Is that an opportunity where you could have prepared something and like just recorded it and put it into your PowerPoint? You don't need to be fancy about it. And as you said, it's playing to the strengths of an online audience. Like, built preparing for it. So you can take on some of this stuff that we've tried out, but without having to be, bespoke software, fancy things. It could just be a voice recording, a video recording that you shove into a PowerPoint.
Yeah, cool.
So I think that this has been good. I want to sort of like zoom out a little bit and just kind of get a little bit more of your mission statement. What's the kind of reason behind what you're doing? Is it just a general, can you talk to, that point, like, why are you doing this?
Yeah, I'll talk a bit about me, Daniel, and my background, and then how you got involved as well. So I've always been involved in projects, like I studied computing science and I was a computer programmer and I worked in tech, but I always thought, this is much more interesting and this is a powerful tool that actually more people should learn. We need more people who are not just consumers of technology, but understand how to make and build things with it as well. What I'm not saying is that everyone should be a computer programmer or everyone should learn how to program, but certainly we need to know, are there ways that we can use tools to help improve things? Like, should we be having more people with these digital skills that are working in all sorts of jobs? So I've always been involved in projects that are about improving people's digital skills. We set up a thing called Coder Dojo, which is a network of coding clubs in Scotland. So that was like volunteer-run coding clubs for teenagers. But at the same time, as well as doing that, I wanted to go out into workplaces and do sort of digital skills training. So we partnered with trade unions in Scotland. So we go out into workplaces through trade unions and do sort of everything from sort of basic digital skills right up to some more complicated topics as well. And what that means is we've been able to give people sort of more advanced digital skills training, but in terms, in their normal job, they're a prison officer or a train driver or a retail worker as well. They're not people who would normally be in like a tech job or what would be considered a technology job as well. So my background has always been about how can we like find more ways of using technology to help people improve their digital skills. And that's how I've been working with Daniel now for about 8 years now, Daniel.
Yeah, and my sort of routine, I guess, was somewhat similar-ish. I was always really interested in computers and tech and robotics and stuff when I was really young, and I always did computing all the way through school, even when there was only like 3 of us in the class. But then I didn't choose to go and study computing at uni because it doesn't feel like it's the thing for me. I didn't find computing at school engaging enough to be kind of confident that this is what I want to do with the next 5 years of my life studying and then however long actually working in software or something. So I went and did engineering and I really enjoyed that, but I still always was more into the sort of digital tech side of everything. So, and then at the same point, I was like really like teaching. I like sort of meeting new people. I like explaining things. And I was working in the science center at the same time as I was studying. And then that's about when I met Craig. Craig was working at the science center as well as part of like the digital team, and we sort of did different sort of Coder Dojo coding clubs together in sort of the digital skills program that they were running there. And we thought, okay, well, how can we kind of improve this kind of perception of computing and skills? And most of our activities, they're not for people who have already sort of identified computing as the thing that they want to do, or data science or security. It's not people who have necessarily chosen the subject. We try and go in sort of like the start of high school or the end of primary school where they're thinking about what they want to do, what subjects they might want to choose. We give them our lessons are a bit of a change of pace. There's a slightly different dynamic and atmosphere. We focus on what's going to be fun and interesting, and it lets them kind of explore and get a kind of an impression of what it would be like to work in tech, rather than focusing necessarily on like, these are the learning objectives of our sessions. Like, we don't start off with learning objectives. We try and fit them roughly in with the curriculum so that we're using the same language that they're hearing from the teachers, but it's not like we're going to do this lesson because that's what teachers do, that's what they're good at. We want to kind of give them a bit of a different flavor, a different taste of what it would be like to work in the sector, or sort of inspire them to kind of develop these skills a bit further.
There's so much scope for improving how this sort of tech is taught, and I've felt this for years. Like, I studied at university 20 years ago, and they wanted to teach us Fortran. I was into games programming, and it was just like it was impossible to get what I needed from a normal curriculum. So, I'm glad to see that you're bringing in a bit more of that, a more sophistication into that type of education.
Yeah. I also think I often work on sort of government digital transformation projects and things. And one of the challenges I encounter is that the staff's expectation of technology and digital is so low that they accept terrible interfaces and tools to work with because they don't have those digital skills that you're talking about teaching that make them understand that what they're being given and asked to do and presented with is just not good enough. And so, I totally appreciate that, the importance of lifting everybody's digital skills, not because everyone needs to be a computer scientist, but just so they need to know that, like, it's like driving your car. You need to know if it sounds funny, or if you should be going back to the mechanic because it's not working right, rather than, it's my computer, I best not question it because, I don't know, it's going to spontaneously combust or something. Yeah. So yeah, I'm I appreciate what you do. I think it's great.
Hopefully
Very
it
good.
like defends government, people from a bit the snake oil salesman to some extent as well. Like that's another side of it.
Yeah, you can have a better conversation with people, can't you, about
Yeah,
what
yeah,
might be
yeah.
possible?
Yes.
Yeah, I just remember this quote I had. So as a user researcher, I was loads of times talking to lots of different people, and I was talking to somebody in local government who had been part of a failed IT project, and she said, "But it's so easy to be bamboozled by IT people," and it is when now there's not many of them that approach it with not many of us, should I say. I should put that sort of approach it in that way of like, these let me try and explain what I'm doing rather than make it, hide the magic. You're allowed to have some pre-recorded videos, but, it's not quite what we're talking about. If you're still showing people where the password goes in, that's all good stuff. Yeah, sounds great. Really interesting talking to you.
So thank you very much for coming on our burgeoning podcast episode. What's this, 8, I think? Can you tell where can people find more about digital skills education?
Yeah, so if you want to find about all our projects, it's digitalskillseducation.com. And if you want to play some of those interactive live lessons, you go to cyberskillslive.com. So yeah, go to digitalskillseducation.com or cyberskillslive.com.
Perfect, and we'll put those links in the show notes, which will be on the website, which is at canyousseemyscreenpodcast.com. And if anyone's watching, if we got an email from Craig about the podcast. If you've got something interesting to offer to this field, then please feel free to get in touch at hi@canyousseemyscreenpodcast.com. And so with that, we'll say goodbye and thank you again, and have a good rest of your day. So cheers, goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.